Welcome, fellow adventurers, to another special episode of the Drippin' Creativity Podcast. I am your host, Chris Corvan, and today we are diving into the magical world of tabletop RPGs. Before we get in, I just want to remind everybody of the upcoming live stream fundraiser on June 29th, starting at 3 p.m. MST. We are raising funds for the Trevor Project through Tiltify. It is going to be so much fun. Make sure to come and check it out. I'm going to be there with Sarah Burton. It's just going to be great. I'm gonna love it. It's gonna be so much fun. All right, now let's jump in and pull together these amazing people from throughout the multiverse for this first of probably many tabletop roundtables. We have with us Justin Gann.
Hey guys, I don't know, after an intro like that, I feel like maybe I should have stretched first, but I've been in the TTRPG space for a long time. If any of you follow me on Threads, you probably know me for posting a lot of my off the rails campaign stuff. But yeah, I'm trying to branch out into things outside of D&D. There's a lot of awesome games, so I'm just here to nerd out and talk about whatever we're going to talk about today, because if it's TTRPG related, I can probably talk on it for one time.
And why is your hat not on? Sorry, Chris. Why is your hat
It doesn't fit over the headphones.
Oh, okay.
Look, excuses.
And before we move on from there, I just wanted to announce right here that Justin is going to be hosting our Saturday show for the Drippin' Creativity podcast and channel, where he's going to be talking about all things TTRPGs, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And then moving on from there, we have the eldritch being themselves, Thérèse.
Oh, I thought you were talking about it. I was like, he needs more black. Yes, hello. Yeah. I'm fueling up still, clearly. Hi.
And then finally rounding out is the award-nominated amazing GM of so many amazing shows himself, Edward Spence.
I mean, my own introduction will be far more underwhelming, but yes, I'm Edward Spence. I'm a floating GM on the wind. You can find me wherever there are good casts. I've been incredibly fortunate. I still feel very fresh-faced, I think, within the industry, but primarily working with indie systems and non-D&D. So I tried running my first game of 5e after like years, and I have not missed the prep at all.
So actually that kind of starts off very well with the very first question that I'm going to throw to the three of you here, based on you running your own games, helping other people's, and being part of a game. Preparation versus improvisation. How do you balance kind of that fine line of being prepared as possible but improvising when you're dealing with a whole bunch of people that like to fuck up your shit? What percentage of your session is kind of pre-planned versus improv on the spot? Let's start with Ed.
Oh no, I'm not prepared. I mean that is it. It's improvisation. It's a cliche to say, but the principle of yes and I think is incredibly important. I don't know. I think it's different for different people, and I'm really interested to sort of see what the rest of you think. But for me, I like to know the details of the sandbox. Like if I have the sandbox planned out, and I will plan it out meticulously, I will know, what sandcastles reside where, and I will know kind of what the political discourses between those castles. I understand this analogy is falling apart very quickly, but the moment I have all of the details and the parameters of that sandbox, it is then just handing it entirely over to the players, and allowing them to play in it, knock down buildings, and sort of create their own stories. I think for me, I don't know, there's so often this idea of the GM versus the player, and players ruining sort of the GM story. And I don't know, for me, that I think it's true that no GM's plan survives contact with the players, but I think it's because it's no one person's story. And I think that every offer that you receive from a player can only enhance the notes that you have written down. So personally for me, I'll have a general. My session 1 will generally be very heavily planned out, wanting to seed themes and narrative beats, and basically taking all of the foundations that the players have given, NPCs, desires, things like that. So before a session, after we've had a session 0, I will send a list of questions to players, which is, very basic things like, what's your character look like? How old are they? Do they have any titles or nicknames? What is their favorite food? And then I'll go one level deeper, and what was your childhood like? Do you have any family or sort of friends or significant others? And then it will go down into, right, what are your desires? What is one place you never want to go back to? And then I will sort of round it out with, and what is a secret that you don't want the rest of the group to know? What is one thing that you want kept to yourself? Because that provides your inciters, it provides your story for you. And so session 1 is basically taking the seeds that have been given and planting them. And then each successive session will just be a vague framework of knowing the players and the characters and their motivations. Given the information that they now have, I feel this is where they're likely to go. But so long as I know the details of the sandbox they're playing in, if they decide to go to point B rather than point A that I expected them to, I have a loose idea as to what resides there. I think it's being prepared enough that you're not literally writing scenes out for them, but you have an idea of where their compass will go. And they will always surprise you. They'll throw the compass away and go, actually, we're going to use a sundial now. And that's exciting as well, because it's their story. For me, anyway.
Do you have contingency plans? And that makes me curious. Like, how many layers of contingency plans do you typically have for a game or a session? Because I know people that have hundreds of them. Like, every contingency is mapped, and other people are like, we've got a couple, but otherwise it's loose.
I think because most of the games that I run have a finite amount of episodes, so everyone around the table is very aware we only have 5 sessions or 10 sessions to tell this story, so we want to see all of those arcs come to their conclusion. And so I think there's a shared awareness of, I don't know if it's storytelling instinct or practiced skill, but I think for me, certainly I've been very blessed. A lot of the casts understand like the themes and the tone of what we're doing. And so I only prepare one outcome, because I'm like, thematically, that is where this is leading. But the important thing is it is not a railroad, because otherwise why are you telling a story with people? You may as well just be writing a novel at that point. So for me, I'm like, this is the truth of the world. Like, these are the facts of the world. These things will happen. And then if the players decide to go off in a different direction, I'm like, okay, I have this information that they need to know from this one encounter. They're not going to encounter that person or that sort of environment or that plot hook, so how is that seeded wherever else they go? Because there are reverberations throughout the world. So yeah, generally I tend to only very vaguely plan for one presumed outcome based on where they're going, and then it's just kind of a matter of recycling. I'm a big fan of recycling, and equally, if you haven't been able to do something in one campaign, I will say it's okay to take that and use it in another campaign if it works for another group as well.
Tess,
Yeah.
Justin?
I think it's an interesting point that Ed made about, for him, and only having a finite amount of episodes. Like, I've only got so much time to tell a story. So for me, that's a very different way of doing a game. I've been running my campaign for, we're a little over 6 years now.
Wow.
But to your point, I did say at the beginning, like, this is where we're starting, and without spoiling anything, I said there is a definite end that I want to get to. But other than that, there were there were these points and things that I just wanted to make sure that we got to these things so that they were generally moving toward that end goal. But outside of that, it has been entirely up to them on how they navigate to each and every point along the way. And sometimes it has been, you know, they barely managed to get there. They might have been upside down on fire and with 1 HP or whatever, but they got there.
So did you share, obviously with no spoilers, but did you, I guess, share an idea of what that end goal was? Or was it just saying, I have an end goal in mind, so be aware of that? Or...
Yeah, I told them, because I definitely didn't want to give anything away. They still have no idea how this is going to play out, and we're on the final arc at this point. But I just said, hey, I just want you guys to know, like, I have this very high level story arc, but really as long as we start here and we end here, like, whatever's in between, I'm excited for. And I will make sure that, you know, as you guys are telling your story, I am getting you guys generally toward that goal by way of providing, you know, good narrative elements and intrigue and things like that to get them toward that point. And as we've gone on, it has become more of, they were pretty much on the right track, so I just let them have at it and just added some fun along the way.
Tess, any thoughts?
I tend to be probably more improvisation than planning. I love research. I've always loved research. Planning is, it has its uses. And I say that knowing full well that I'm in company of at least 2 very good master planners. And Ed, I can only assume that you're up for an award. You're at least fairly competent at planning. So,
I wouldn't assume that.
We'll let that one go. So I like to. Am I allowed to curse on this, or is this?
I'm pretty sure I've said fuck about 4 times already.
Okay,
so
good.
yeah.
Oh, good. Oh,
Just checking. I like to fuck with my players. So when I've done DM GM duties, what I typically do is I set up a story, I give them a general idea, but I don't tell them that from day one they're going to be fucked with. Like, I will change something when they arrive at the table that they will not know about. They will know something's going to happen. They won't know what it is. So one time they all arrived at the table and I told them they were dead. They were waking up. And they had not planned for that. Another time I took away their abilities and basically swapped them out for other ones. And I said, you're gonna have to earn back the spells that you lost, or your abilities. You might want to keep them along the way. You might want to change them out. But for right now, what you thought you were starting with is not what you're starting with. Yes, ma'am. So yeah, I like messing with my players. And I know that I tend to be somebody that people come to for really off-the-wall, bizarre ideas because I'm not daunted by them. I like strange puzzles, the locked room mysteries and things like that. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm more interested in doing research for elements I want to bring into a story as opposed to planning out sessions, which is irresponsible. I fully admit that. It's not great.
well, then I'm irresponsible because I feel like that's the way I go about things. I love lore, and I love like you said, like looking at research and things like that. Not because I want to be necessarily like 100% accurate or like verbatim or anything like that, but just so I have a good understanding. And then as I'm going, it might not even be something that I have an intent to use. I just like to look stuff up so that I have things that I can store away for way down the road. And then, you know, the players present an opportunity. I'm like, oh, here we go. Time to fuck around and find out for these guys.
Because do either of you find, especially in those approaches, are there any systems that you find kind of benefit that approach more than others, or that suit your particular kind of style?
When you say system, what exactly do you mean?
Like game system?
Yeah, sorry.
Gotcha. No, you're fine. I mean, I primarily DM D&D 5e, I'm looking to start actually running some other game types, but yeah, I think really any system within reason could probably, I mean, you could probably run with a planning or not planning style like that. It just kind of depends. And I know this is kind of probably going to be a segue to something else, but you have to as a DM or GM be open to letting your players kind of guide kind of your process, because they're going to tell the story that they're going to tell. And as a DM GM, you have to be able to roll with that and say, like you said, Ed, it's that kind of yes, and you're like, okay, cool, this is the way we're going to go. Not necessarily what I had in mind, but like, yeah, let's go explore that. And then you have to, as the DM GM, just kind of figure out how to realign yourself or the story or in the way in which you were going to do things. Maybe you didn't have something planned and you're like, you know what, I'm going to need a 10-minute break because I need to go look something up. Or, you know, you have those things locked and loaded, and you can pull something out of your back pocket and be like, well, I wasn't expecting to use this, but you know, let's go.
That 10-minute break actually brings up a very intriguing point, especially when it comes to you, Ed, being mainly actual play and you know, streamed or live. How do you handle things you weren't expecting like that?
I mean, it happens quite a lot. So every Tuesday, generally I tend to prefer pre-recorded streams, just because you have a little more control over the edit, and you can add in soundscapes and ambience and music, and you can use that to sort of enhance the theatre of the mind a little bit more. But every Tuesday I work with Wounded Warrior Project, raising money for veterans every Tuesday, and we do live games, which generally 10 episodes, and the audience can donate, and they can donate to affect dice rolls, they can donate to introduce NPCs, but also once they reach a certain threshold, they cause something earth-shattering to happen in the story, which I then have to think of on the spot. And it's about like it is challenging. It is really challenging, because especially when you're telling so at the moment we're barreling towards the end of the Fourth Age, which is our imagined next chapter of Middle-earth, and with that comes a certain amount of responsibility. You know, Tolkien means a lot to a lot of people, and Middle-earth is certainly for me like a huge reason so many got into fantasy, and you don't want to trivialize that. You want to make sure it's satisfying, and you know, you're not just turning someone into a pot plant, like, you know, for the sake of, you know, chaos. So yeah, it is a challenge, but I think like a lot of my background is in theatre, and I think the instinct is so baked into me that if something goes wrong, in quotes, you just have to keep going, because you're performing to an audience. And I think that's the difference between a home game and actual play, where, you know, ultimately the question is, why are you choosing to share this story? And if it's to entertain an audience, you need to treat it like a style of entertainment, even if it's chaos, or if it's telling, you know, a grounded emotional story, or if it is just to watch a bunch of friends get together and improvise over dice. I think the intent behind whatever you're sharing has to remain true. And so much of what I do is generally telling stories with very skilled storytellers, and it's wanting to honor the time that they are putting into it as much as the audience. And I realize this doesn't necessarily answer the question, I think, because each project differs tonally from the last. You know, it's like whenever people ask actors, like, what is your process? It's going to differ depending on whether you're preparing for a musical or preparing for Shakespeare. And so yeah, I think again it comes down to listening to the players and their needs and their desires, I think, and going, okay, I wasn't expecting that, so how do we use that to enhance the arcs of each of the characters? And it's a challenge, and you do sometimes get it wrong. Like the amount of times I've walked away from a session and gone, Fuck, I don't think I did that thematic or narrative justice. So how do I fix that next time?
Definitely. Any final points before we move on to the next one?
From me or
Anyone?
I think I've rambled enough, frankly.
There's going to be lots of time for this. This is why I scheduled an hour and a half, man. I've only got 4 questions. No.
Oh, we'll just ad lib then.
That's a blatant lie.
It's a very blatant lie.
Yeah,
I'm
how much
way too
prep did you
overprepared for
do,
this.
Chris?
For this alone, I have a total of 17 questions and 27 rapid fire questions.
Oh wow.
Oh, God.
And
Well, now I just want to hit them all. Challenge accepted.
Railroad us.
Whack-a-mole.
well, it sometimes a question gets asked and the person's just like, no. And it's like, okay, let's move on. So then let's actually move on to something we have touched on a couple times here. We're going to start with Tess with this one. Managing player expectations. How do you manage what a player wants to happen and the narrative that you have planned?
One thing I make it a point to do, and whether you call it a session 0 or session 1, is I typically always try to meet with people one-on-one because I want to know if there's something in particular they really want to hit with their character, with their story during a campaign. Whether it's going to be something that's major, whether it's going to be something that's minor, whether it's going to be something that ends up having like a catalytic effect, doesn't matter. Like, I want to know what it is, and I will always try to incorporate that. Because if you're allowing your players to have that degree of agency, they are going to be far more invested in telling their story, right? But there have been times when people have said, oh, I want this or I want that, and I'm like, that's just not going to happen. Whether it's because it would fuck up everything in a very non-manageable and kind of irresponsible fashion, because it doesn't really take other players into consideration, which is also, that's the thing. Player expectations have to be managed because there's other players. So I had somebody once that wanted a feud with one of the other players, and they wanted some horrible like death debt involved, and I went, have you even asked them like if they're okay with having murdered your family? And they're like, no, I mean, I figured you could do it. I'm like, I'm not asking them if you can murder their family. Like, you be an adult and have that conversation, and if they say no, you're gonna have to be okay with that. Now, we can have a vendetta of sorts, but that's going to have to be with like an NPC or with at least another player that's okay with it. So you have to bear in mind that sometimes you get players, I don't want to use the word selfish because that's not the right word, but good players, I feel like, get very excited about their stories. And I think any one of us who's ever done any writing, has ever done any storytelling, we get very excited about our stories. But there's that old thing about you have to kill your darlings. And as a player, that sometimes is more true than anything else. And it's also very true for DMs and GMs, because the best laid plans, I mean, what is that line from Deadwood? Announcing your plans is a way to hear God laugh. And it's so you have to kind of remind people gently that there are others at the table and to be adults. But you also want to let them know, I try to set loose guidelines like, okay, if you want to have a romance happen, let me know. Talk to another player. If you want it with an NPC that's been introduced, let me know. We'll see what we can do. If you want to have a relation, some long lost family member show up, let me know. Let me see what we can do. But if it's going to be something like, I want to magically come across a dragon egg and I want a pet dragon, it's like, that's nice. Does everyone at the table get a pet dragon? No? Well, then we're not doing it. Like, if you don't bring enough pet dragons for the class, you don't get one. So yeah, it's a bit of a negotiation. I mean, I took enough law classes, so I feel like I'm pretty good at it by now. But it's people are people. We all want to be heroes in our own stories, or villains if you're like me. But I also think the reason why people gravitate to things like this, and especially with something like live plays or actual plays, is because they want that interaction so much with other people. They want to be sharing a story, not simply telling a story. And so that's usually when you see people's kind of adult mentality kick in and go, okay, it's not just about me. But you always get an asshole. There's always an asshole. Just plan for it.
How did you make the transition from lore to TTRPGs?
Oh, I didn't finish a lot. I have like 4 degrees. My main background is actually criminology, so
Oh wow.
which is actually very useful in TTRPGs. Planning practice is excellent. No, I dabble in a lot of things, and I think that's kind of why TTRPGs appeal to me, because there are so many different systems, there are so many different stories, and there are so many ways to flip convention on its head. I mean, you don't have to tell. You mentioned Tolkien, which is obviously, it's very important, as you said, to a lot of people. And it's very, I don't like to use the word institutionalized, but I'm going to use that word. It's very institutionalized fantasy lore. But you can still flip it on its head. You could put it in a modern setting. You can put it in an industrial narrative. You could put it in science fiction. It's about keeping the essence of the story he was trying to tell and the qualities he was trying to imbue these characters with. Keeping that intact is important. It doesn't have to be high fantasy. It can be something else, but you're talking about keeping a lineage together, essentially. So I like doing that. And I feel like being able to dabble in a lot of different things means I come at things from a lot of different angles. It's what I used when I did marketing. It's what I used when I did creative writing. It's just, it's always a benefit. But yeah, I'm a big believer that if you have an idea, think about it for 5 minutes and come at it from 5 different angles. And if you can't tell me that same idea in 5 different ways, it's not an idea that's going to hold up very well. Because, you know, I'm the asshole sometimes. Sometimes it's me.
I mean, sometimes the players have to learn how to manage us a little bit too. That's fair.
Yeah.
It's a group setting, so it's a two-way street.
Yeah.
And how do you manage the player expectations there, Justin?
Well, it's a give and take, like I said. I feel like as the DM GM, like, you know, I have the things that, and let me back up a little bit. I think when you first start out, you really want to be more about very, very group oriented. And not that as you mature as a DM GM, you get away from that, but I feel like you grow in understanding of how to tell the stories in a way that still includes and incorporates your players without being so like I need like all of this input from you, and not that's bad, but there's a level of like, you know, I wrote a story as the DM GM and like, this is the story that I want to tell. I would love for you guys to be a part of this story, and I would love for you guys to buy in on those things. So I think it's just kind of interesting to think about like where you're at in kind of that journey as a storyteller, because there's really no right or wrong. You just have to know yourself and be okay with saying, you know, you can say like, these are the things that I want to tell. And when you have a player that's like, well, but I also want to do this, and you have that agency as the person kind of in charge of the group to say, I can appreciate that, but that doesn't fit with the story that I'm going for here. And that's entirely okay. Now, granted, there's a way to do it in a nice way, and there's a way to be, you know, a real dick about it. So try to do it in a way that's help them understand where you're coming from, because I feel like once they understand better where you're coming from, then they're going to be invested in that, and they'll say, okay, let me go back to the drawing board and let me work on that, because now that I get that, let me try to get something that really makes sense with this narrative. So I think that's kind of the long and the short of how I manage players. I mean, there's a lot of other things with like when it comes to like rules and different things like that, but overall I think it's just that, you know, you just have to have the confidence as the person running the group to make decisions.
I mean, I honestly not much to add. I think because ultimately it's about transparency. I think, you know, transparency of what are your intentions as the GM, but I don't know, I think the more I do, and I think think I've fallen into. I believe my role. Now, I don't think this is true of all GMs, but certainly my preferred role is a facilitator of other people's stories. And I think I'm so interested in the stories that players want to tell, and any way that I can manifest that is I will do. And I think in terms of my, like, obviously as a GM, a lot of the time, as you know, both of you have said, I think the seed is instigated by you. The world that you're playing in, the tone of story, and the, not always, but I think sometimes the themes that you want to explore, you will lay those out. And from my point of view, that is preparing like a 2-page world building document, just going, you don't need to read this, you don't need to skim it, but these are the important points to know about this world. This is, and to just kind of give an idea of, these are the landmarks that we will be touching upon during this story, just so the players have an awareness of that. So that is generally the first thing that I will send, and then generally we will have a session 0 where we first of all discuss safety tools. I would thoroughly recommend seeking out so Stella Luna, who is one of the best GMs in the business. They're incredible, but has put together an incredible lines and veils spreadsheet, which has transparency around romance options and sort of anything around sex and intimacy, and that is all transparent for everyone to see, so everyone knows like who desires what out of a game, because I think that is important. You know, we're living out fantasy and we're living out escapism, and I think it's important to know who's comfortable with what, and then, you know, we that is available to players to edit anonymously for anything that they don't want to encounter during a campaign, and anything they might be particularly jazzed about, like coming across, where they're like, yeah, I really want to just like hack some people apart, and you know, and other people might not want that, and you know, again, it's about establishing tone. But then off the back of that, like I say, character questions, and from that point onwards, having given the players everything that I'm hoping to achieve from a story, it is then them volleying that back and going, well, this is what I want out of a story. And from those questions that I receive, I will sort of, similar to yourself, I'll sort of have one-to-one sessions and sort of go, right, okay, let's really dig down into this. Like, why this? Would you be happy with this maybe having a connection with this particular part of the world? Because then that sets it up with this character, and sort of trying to put together a tapestry through all these disparate threads. But yeah, I think it's just, if I want to condense all of that into a much more digestible nutshell, it's just about transparency, I think, and being honest about what you want from your players, and hopefully they will do the same. Because yeah, occasionally you will come up against people who want to commandeer the group, and who will want to, you know, we talk about main character syndrome a lot, and I think there is a way as a GM of curbing that slightly, but sometimes some storytelling styles just won't fit. I think that's okay, but it just means that you're not necessarily meant to tell stories together. And, you know, when that happens, it's sad, and it's, you know, it can be disappointing sometimes, especially when you're both excited for a shared story. But I think it's just about understanding the needs of the group as a whole, but also as individuals as well.
Definitely. This actually kind of segues into something, because we've mentioned romance twice, and I'd be amiss if we don't tackle this at all. Romance is something that's, to me anyways, going back and kind of checking out the industry as a whole, especially with actual play, really has only become a more common thing in the past, 5-10 years or so. Do you find that is completely necessary to have in a game, or is it one of those things where you need to discuss with the players and figure out if you will allow it? What's your overall thoughts on that?
So I think that it's just one of those things that you want to cover in your session 0. It definitely doesn't have to be in any story by any means, but yeah, I would say if your players are interested in it, if you even just have one person that's interested in it, bring it up to the rest of the table and just be like, hey, like, this person is interested. That's not necessarily to say that it's with any player characters or anything like that, but just so you guys know, like, that's an element that players want to explore. Like, is everybody on board with that? Because yeah, it's one of those things, like, you just want to make sure it's going to be comfortable for everybody. But I think as long as people are on board with it, yeah, I mean, do as much or as little as you guys as a group are comfortable with.
Sure. It's weird because I think Ed brought up a great thing about, have you thought about this much murder? Can we have a little bit less murder? It's kind of the same with romances, that everybody has a different threshold. Everybody has different kinks, different preferences. Do you want to romance a player is a lot more involved than do you want to romance an NPC. A layered storytelling that can be, if done correctly, as realistic as anything else. So when you look at stories, one of the things that pisses me off so quickly about a story, about a movie, about anything is, are your characters having basic questions and needs? Do they need to sleep? Do they need to eat? Do they need to drink? Do they need to shit? Do they need to piss? Do they want to cry? Do they need to get their wounds bandaged? If your characters are going from A to B to C and they are expressing none of that, I am not really invested in their struggles. I'm not really invested in their drama. I'm not really invested in the believability of them, because those are all very human things. Romance is another thing that you can interject, because if you have characters that clearly get along, that share a dynamic, that would be something that kind of naturally would occur in that setting. So I think it can be used, and it can be used well. I think you have to be very careful. I think you have to pay a lot of attention to not just what people say, but you have to look around your table and see if there's a lot of non-verbal language. Are people not outwardly uncomfortable? Are they not outwardly saying this makes me uncomfortable, but something that they're doing is clearly disconcerting them? It's making them just, they don't really want to be the person that says I don't like this, but they clearly don't. So it's a lot of looking at nonverbal cues as much as it is asking questions.
Ed, turning the question to you, Thandor, as a love NPC, I'm just throwing that out there. Anyways, continue.
So, for context, Chris has donated a beautiful gem of a character to our Lord of the Rings campaign, who I love. But yeah, I think, and I'd be really interested to hear what the both of you think as well, especially because you spoke a lot, Tess, about non-verbal cues and how easy that is, especially as a lot of groups are moving to a more virtual space as well. But yeah, I think like romance is fun, and it's awful, and it hurts, and it lifts us up, and it's I'm not going to go full hot priest from Fleabag, but all of that, it's like and I think it is a beautiful enricher of stories, and some people really want that. But I think also, again, it's about, and I think it keeps coming back to what everyone's touching on, it's those expectations. If you're playing a game of D&D, that is very different to if you're playing a game like Good Society, which is rooted in those kind of constraints of Regency fiction and Austen and Bronte, and it is assumed we're all playing this story to flirt with NPCs and maybe each other as well. Like, that is sort of the drive of that. And then you have a game like Vampire the Masquerade, and the assumption is you're probably all going to get a little bit weird and horny, and that's like a big reason why you maybe want to play that. But so I think there are certain expectations that come about through the game system that you're playing, But again, it's just, I think it's being willing to have those communications. Like, I remember very early on in a game, so I recently started running a yet-to-be-announced Good Society game, and we are using it because its system, it's based on, rather than any dice or anything, you affect the game through creating rumors and spreading scandal, and you can use that mechanically against or in aid of other players. So we are using that as a system to tell a game of political intrigue. It's Succession meets Game of Thrones. And one of our players came into it and was like, I want to play a character who falls in love and gets her heart broken. That's very important to me.
I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. And there was another player who said, I don't want any romantic stakes in this story at all. And so, knowing that, I was like, great, I won't have those storylines intersect with one another, and that's fine. So again, it comes down to personal desire, which again comes down to the story that you're telling, I think. But I'm a big proponent in romance in games. I think it adds stakes. Even if your own character isn't going through it, if another character is, there are still stakes that affect the rest of the party. If you are given the decision, very basic, do we save this town from this dragon, or does this one character want to save their loved one, which takes the group in an entirely different direction? Suddenly you have a group that is being pulled in two directions. And as a group, you know that the outcome of that is you must all go in the same direction, because you all want to play together. You might want to split the party, but that comes, that depends on the table. But you have stakes and you have something that can cause conflict. And I think that is also very interesting. And I think important, so long as a table is comfortable with that, and is comfortable with that, because you always risk bleed when you go into those slightly more contentious and emotionally fraught scenarios. But if you have a table that is comfortable with that, I think romance is a beautiful instigator for a lot of those more lofty but also messy situations that we as human beings find ourselves in every day.
Yeah, I think that, romance in and of itself can be such a huge tool in your storytelling tool belt. And like you said, if you've got people that aren't interested in it, just make sure that okay, that's fine. Like, we will make sure that your character is not directly, like you said, intersected with that. But to have it going on as, the person who's not interested, well, you have these friends or you have these family, whatever, these people are going through that. And as long as they're still okay with that level, I think that's awesome. I think you can do so much with that, because yeah, it gives you a lot of other, it just gives you so many more scenarios to kind of to toy with, because romance is one of those things where you can either throttle it way back, or you can punch it full steam ahead. And so sorry, did I say something funny?
Throttling and punching romance is,
yeah,
and there's room for that too.
Again, fill out the form.
Yeah, listen, this is why we fill out the lines and veils. It's all good. But yeah, I think it's just one of those things where, yeah, you can have just a little bit, and it can be a lot more passive, or you can it can take the focus, even if that's what your table's cool with.
Well, that actually went a lot deeper and longer than I expected for a segue question. Oh, that's great.
You put 3 GM room, Chris. I think.
Yeah, I know. So now before I get into this one, because this next topic is very important and it's something I wanted to cover, I did have a lot more people invited to this. Unfortunately, everybody does not like doing ed time. Ed time is difficult for people. So a lot of people that I invited were just like, oh, it's ed. Shit, I can't. I'm busy. So... But we are going to be talking about inclusion and representation within games right now. When it comes between both game accessibility to players with disabilities is definitely a very huge thing. It's a lot easier being digital with streaming and all that. But what other types of steps do you feel would be very helpful for somebody running a tabletop game when it comes to dealing with that? As my cat has now entered chat.
I mean, I think one thing you want to do, if you can, if you're playing with somebody who is deaf or hard of hearing, is to have everybody learn basic sign language, just to be able to greet them, to check in with them, because it's a little thing to learn, but it goes a long way to making someone feel comfortable. Oh my goodness, look at your baby.
Focus, Tess.
Sorry. Yeah, I think being able to kind of learn the basics of sign language to be able to make someone feel comfortable at the table, to understand. And when I've had players, I've had a player disabled who was legally blind. I had another one who was deaf, and so what I kind of worked with everybody on was like just being sensitive, but not treating them like they're fragile. You know, they're not going to break. It's just understanding that the way they communicate is going to be a little bit different. So to be a little bit more patient, but also reach out with things that could help them. You know, if you have a resource that might help people with Braille, if you have resources that help people learn sign language very easily, if you talk to them and say, hey, is there anything you would like us to learn or to know to help you feel more comfortable at the table, let us know, because that's how you kind of keep those environments happy and productive, and also inclusive. It's one of the things that I used to rail at corporations about in my daily job life, and it made me quite happy to call people out for not putting their money where their mouth was in terms of accessibility and inclusivity. So I think making sure that your table understands that everybody is welcome, everybody is equal, and that if we are all being very honest, we all communicate very differently. It doesn't matter if you have, perfect vision or not. You're still communicating very differently from the people next to you. And so we all benefit from learning how to talk to one another, both in a story environment, but also out of that environment. And I think that's just, it's just mindfulness. And if, again, you're going to get an asshole sometimes who doesn't see the point, who doesn't get why it's important, who doesn't think that they need to be considerate like that. And that is somebody that, quite frankly, can fuck off, because how can I trust you to be sensitive with people while telling a story that can potentially encompass hundreds of hours of our lives if you can't take a couple of hours out of your life to learn how to greet somebody properly, or to learn how to be more patient with somebody? If you can't be that person, then I don't want you at my table. Fuck off.
Yeah, I mean, obviously for us, there's especially with the live aspect, I think. So something that Sam has always been Sam is our producer over at Wounded Warrior Project, and just an incredible player and indie person. But Sam has been a big proponent in accessibility, certainly within the way in which games are presented to an audience. And a great deal of care and attention goes into the presentation of players, and making sure we have captioning, and making sure that our overlays are accessible, and that all of the information is very easily understood, and we have a dice roll log so that people understand what it is that we're rolling. We will explain, because also, a sense of it is a lot of people are coming into a game that they they haven't necessarily seen played before, so it's also wanting to showcase the game at its best as well, and you want people to be able to understand that in sort of a visual way, but also for them to understand everything that is being said at a table. So captioning is a big thing, especially in pre-recorded stuff where you do have the time to And equally, you know, as Tess was saying, in addition to sign language, there are a whole host of, I think Google does live captioning as well, which especially in a video meeting is very, very useful. And, you know, can help players, you know, just especially when you have, I think in so many ways, like playing virtually has brought so many people from all across the world together in so many different ways, but it can still be quite isolating. And so it's finding ways to bridge those gaps, I feel. And, you know, I think, and you alluded to this earlier, Chris, I think there is an issue in the industry where, and I can't speak to America, but certainly in England, I think there is a big issue where a lot of the UK games industry is very white men of a certain age, and I think we are still breaking out of that, I think, and I think we are seeing more representation in the stories that are being told. We're not necessarily seeing the support for those stories in the way that we do with certain larger companies that hold more sway. But I think even there, strides are being made. And I think it comes down to hiring practices and sensitivity readers and cultural consultants and championing the voices that I think haven't been championed for a very long time. And I think for those who have been in the industry for a long time, I think it's about understanding that, being blunt, I think the world has had enough stories from people who look like me, and I think that's why I don't like the idea of a GM being an arbiter of stories being told, because it is collaborative. It is a means for people to sit around a virtual fireplace and explain how they see the world through an avatar of themselves. And I think as a GM, your role is to make sure that there is space enough and that all of your players are given space to tell the stories they want to tell with the people they want to see in that world, I think. And I think there are people who can sort of speak far more eloquently and with far more information than I do, but I think that's why I've settled on the idea of a GM as a facilitator rather than a storyteller. I think it's important to uplift, and that comes in casting. You know, it means, you know, looking at the tables you have and evaluating why your table looks the way it does. And I think that takes a certain degree of self-awareness, and I think it takes a willingness to grow as well. Yeah.
I would.
Now you do.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, because you mentioned the Wounded Warrior Project, and I'm wondering how much the issue of like PTSD comes up in terms of, like, I know that I played at a table with a couple of veterans and they had very bad PTSD, and so one of the things that we did was noise level was kept fairly low. Certain sounds we just kind of eliminated from the table just to help kind of keep everybody calm, and I'm wondering if that's something that you've come up against in working for that end.
It's interesting. So our players are TTRPG performers, but a lot of our audience are veterans, and Sam, so Sam's husband comes from military, and so there is definitely a lot of care put into the stories that we tell, but also the way in which they're presented. I remember for our last series. It was a Tales from the Loop campaign, so very, very Spielbergian, very 80s, very Stranger Things. And Sam wanted her character, she played kids, wanted her character to be the daughter of a man who had seen active service and who was struggling with not necessarily PTSD, but with trauma, and that did take us into some uncomfortable and honest storytelling. And there were times, and that required checking in as well. It required checking in not only for her safety as a player and my own comfort as a GM, but also making sure that these things weren't being trivialized either. And one of the nice things, certainly, that Sam had feedback about was seeing those stories dealt with in a sensitive environment that has an awareness for its audience. Because you're never playing in a bubble, especially when you're choosing to put something out onto the internet. You are sharing that story, and again, I know I keep using the word, but it's intent. And you have to understand your intent of that story, not just with your players. You know, the amount of times I see like a bio of a podcast or an actual play where it's just, we're just a bunch of friends, like rolling dice at the table, and you're not. You're choosing to share that. So it becomes more than that, and you have a responsibility to the safety of your audience as much as your players. And that comes in representation, and it also comes in the way that you choose to present that representation, I think. I don't know if that answers the question.
No, it does, absolutely.
No.
Justin?
Yeah, I think one of the points I'd like to probably start with is you said, you mentioned checking in with your players. And I think that's something that I have definitely tried to be super mindful at my tables. Whether it's my in-person table or my completely virtual play-by-post folks. Sometimes after maybe a bigger narrative where some big things have happened, I just want to decompress outside of the game, say hey, I know we just had there was a lot that happened. There was some pretty big things, whether it was maybe death related or something traumatic or just high intensity. But I think checking in with your players, regardless of whatever it is, when you have those kind of those really those bigger sessions, to say, hey, I just want to take some time in a very chill environment to check in and say is everybody cool? Was there anything that we went over that you're not okay with? You should always be having those kinds of check-ins along the way to make sure that, like you said, you are being mindful. Your intent is maintaining that direction. You're not getting off into this area that is, maybe a lot more touch and go, or where your players are I don't want to deal with that kind of thing. And also, people's lives change, where when your session 0, they filled out that form and, they were on board with a bunch of things, but maybe something has happened in their real life, and they should be able to come to you. But also as a DMGM, you should be checking in with them to say hey, I know that you checked all these boxes or whatever, are you still good with all that? Has anything changed? And you have got to be receptive to that. If you want to truly have that group experience, you just have to be okay with especially things like that changing as you go. And while my tables, I've never had deaf or hard of hearing players or blind hard of seeing players, things like that. I feel like my home table is pretty dynamic otherwise. There are a lot of groups of people represented there. So I mean, for me, it's been a learning experience too, as the cishet white man in the TTRPG space. I straight up come to my players, I'm hey, I know there's stuff I don't know, so but I want to make sure that this is a space where you feel okay with not only being yourself, like around the table, but whatever character you want to bring to that table is entirely accepted, not just by me, but everybody here. So yeah, setting those session zeros to make sure that everybody's okay, and then checking in periodically throughout your game experience is super important.
I personally think all the accessibility stuff that you guys are talking about, amazing. I love it. It's so great. When it comes to the diversity of your players, it's a lot different in a home game setting than it is in an actual play setting. As Ed had mentioned earlier, there is you are now a performer. I recently had the pleasure and honor of sitting down with Calamity for an interview, and they are just absolutely amazing. And just the discussions about diversity and how it's not the responsibility of the performer to track you down, but as the GM for you to explore and actually watch what is out there to find the best performers for you, to make sure you have a good diverse cast, because there are so many amazing players that just get overlooked because you have the top names that you always see who are always getting the games. But if you spend the time researching and looking at all the other diverse casts out there, like there's lists and websites and all of this available for you. So if you're going to do an actual play at all, take the time, do the research, find the people that fit your table to make sure that you have the diversity and inclusion for everyone, because you represent the internet at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And that's from the native boy. What are you gonna say?
I mean, you also, aside from being somebody that needs to take responsibility and accountability for tracking down players, you also have to be somebody that people feel very comfortable going to you. Because if people don't feel comfortable going to you, that is gonna fuck up your game on so many levels. And it should. By rights, it should. And in talking about, the BIPOC experience, it's no longer, you no longer have the excuse to say, like, oh, I didn't know, or I don't know who to talk to, or nobody came to me. And it's like, well, if no one's coming to you, that means something about you is inapproachable. So you need to work on yourself, number one. But number two, if you really care about it, then you should be seeking it out, just like anything else you want at your table or you want in your life. It's not just going to literally fall into your lap. And if it does, it's a trap. And don't be stupid. We all know that. We all know that's a trap. But it's interesting because we're also now looking at neurodiversity as being a huge thing that's coming to tables that, as we all know, has been around for the dawn of time, since people existed and crawled out of the primordial ooze. But we are now ascribing the correct terminology. We are being mindful of how we talk about certain experiences. And I think that that's another thing where if somebody feels like they can't talk to you about their mental health, they can't talk to you about their disability, then again, what is it about you as a GM, as a DM, that is kind of throwing up that barrier that people think they can't have that conversation with you? And if you are made aware of that, you need to redouble your efforts to bring the right people to the table, to have the right conversations, and if necessary, to apologize, to make amends for mistakes you might have made. Don't make excuses for it. Just simply say, you know what, you're right. I've made this mistake. I didn't include these people. I didn't talk about this the correct way. Apologize and move on. Do better. Like it's really not a difficult concept, but we act a lot of times like people are asking the moon of us. They're not. It's literally treating people with common decency. It's not difficult. We just have a few more words for things, and that's all it is. It's vocabulary and understanding that the social climate is very damaging to a lot of these people, mentally, emotionally, physically. And so why would you not want to make that better in a table where the whole point is to share a story among you and do something wonderful? Why would you not want to bring as many different minds and viewpoints to your table as possible. Like, that just to me is stupid. And that's a simplification. Stupid is a nice word. I'm using that nice. Because otherwise I'm going to start ranting with a lot of very bad words that I don't think are on the approved list. So
and we're running low on that ranting time.
yeah, sorry, I'll stop now.
Yeah, no. No, honestly, this has been amazing. Like, we're an hour and almost 10 minutes in, and again, I think I only actually asked 4 questions. What? So here we're actually going to roll into the rapid fire. Now, how we're going to do this, because I happen to be in the company of 3 people who like to rant. You have 1 minute. I have a timer. Okay.
Wait.
So take a second, take a drink. You got 1 minute to answer the question. Each of you has 1 minute, and that's it.
That's fine.
Oh boy.
So for this one, we're going to start with Justin.
Oh boy.
Hang on.
What is your favorite RPG system and why? Go.
Currently, and I know it's D&D 5e. It's been where I've spent a lot of time, and it's super easy for me to just tell a story within those confines.
Perfect. Tess, go.
I'm really into Salvage Union right now by Leyline Press. They put together a fantastic system that is very easy to get into, to learn, and to go with. So, yeah.
Ed.
Orbital Blues by Soul Muppet. It is sad space cowboys. You play through your depression and your trauma, and you use it mechanically. It is a beautiful game. Also, they have a game about sad vampires coming out at the end of the year, and you should check it out, because I play tested it, and it is phenomenal.
All
That is
vampires are
actually
sad, aren't
Duly noted.
Always.
Yeah. No, they are, but you know what? That really sounds right up my alley.
Yeah, it's
All right. So, Tess, we're going to start with you on this
they?
one.
Okay. Oh, no.
If you can run a fictional, or if you can run a campaign in any fictional universe, book, movie,
Red
whatever.
Rising. Red Rising, Pierce Brown, 100%.
I knew that one was coming. Ed, go.
Yeah.
Well, I've ticked off one, which is Middle-earth, which was very intimidating. Cool, what else? Blade Runner? Blade Runner, I have been eyeing up the Alien game by Free League, and
Yes.
for my
Yes.
money, Free League are putting out some of the best games on pre-existing IP at the moment. So yeah, I've been rewatching Alien. I'll go there.
That's
Hell
my
yeah.
comfort
Just-
movies, Aliens. Movies, comfort movies.
Justin.
Fallout. I love that universe.
Oh, yeah.
I love that universe so much. I have it. As much as I'm a big fan of D&D and Star Wars, like Fallout is right there with me for lore. Ugh, yeah.
See, that's me
All right,
and
now here's
Cyberpunk.
Oh, yeah. And before you continue the next question, I want to ask, now, given the universes that you all have just listed, do you think you would survive? If you really had to live in those universes, would you survive? And if so, for how long? Middle-earth, it's
I
not
mean-
easy, Edward. It's not.
It is not. Also,
Yeah.
men don't survive in Aliens, so
No.
no.
Do you think you'd survive Fallout, Justin?
I'd give it I feel like I'd give it a hell of a go. Yeah.
You've got the hat, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd survive Cyberpunk. Fuck y'all. All right.
That's fair.
So we're going to start with Edward on this next one. Preferred character class in any system.
something sad. I don't often get to play. I don't.
Another class? Class.
I'm gonna say Warlock. Warlock for DD, I reckon. I've never played a Warlock, but that power dynamic and something that's so inherently narrative, I think is very interesting. So yeah, I'm gonna say Warlock.
Sad
Justin.
words.
Oh boy. Right now, I've really been enjoying Sunshine characters. Just because it's, I don't know, it's really fun. I've played a lot of sad and dark characters. Now that's not to say I don't have some dark on the backside of that, but the outwardly sunshine character has been really fun for me to mess with lately.
Excellent, Tess.
Oh fuck.
That's not a class.
Class. I really have been getting into like the smuggler salvager class. I tend to really like playing a character that's kind of emotionally and verbally very above board, but mentally criminal. I like planning crimes. I'm good at crimes.
Not surprising at all. We're doing fantastic with the timing.
Crime class.
I gotta say, if you put a timer on DMs, man, they just get really right to the point. Figured you out.
We didn't have to be called out this loud, Chris.
Yeah.
It's just because we're afraid of you.
All right. Most memorable NPC you ever created, Tess.
Oh, no, I'm not going first. I refuse.
Tess, go. You have 50 seconds.
It was a giant turtle. Wore a beret and ate 3 of my players.
Nice.
They were pretty good.
Ed, go.
It's always the ones you least expect, isn't it? So a throwaway innkeeper, she was a goblin, she was called Granny Fungus. She loved everyone she came into contact with. And my players, they adopted her by the end. She's the only NPC I've ever had character art made of. But my players gifted me with character artwork of Granny Fungus to see out a year of storytelling. So yeah,
That's amazing.
I just have to say, Granny Fungus, and I'm gonna use some of my time for this because I've been allotted an entire minute. Granny Fungus is a fantastic name, and that's a hill I will die on. I don't know this character, but I'm on board with this character. I see why your players adopted this character.
30 seconds.
That's fine. I've got plenty of time, Chris. You said I was too to the point, so I had a Warforged Artificer. That you would think a Warforged, not a lot of emotion and things there, but the way in which I was able to play them, I made my players cry with that story arc, and that is by far my favorite character.
That's just because you were murdering them as you told them stories.
Emotionally, yes.
All right, we are moving on. Oh, okay.
Oh no,
Justin,
I don't like that.
Justin, we're starting with you.
Oh my God.
Best plot twist you ever pulled off. Go.
Oh man. Right off the beginning of my play-by post, we were only into like the first mission, and I killed a very prominent NPC.
Excellent. Like that one. Tess.
I mean, starting them off dead was pretty good, but I feel like I already told you that one, so that's kind of cheating. So, in one of the ways where I fucked up people's powers, I had a psychopomp and I had a typical rogue assassin, and I basically made the assassin afraid of blood and the psychopomp was afraid of ghosts. So they ended up switching jobs. They became like a bonded pair. And they had to go out and basically do missions together because they couldn't really do them without them. So yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Perfect. Ed.
I like connecting bad guys with players. So probably most recent one in 4th Age, a hooded masked figure that had been following the group was not only revealed to be a wraith, but also the deceased twin brother of one of our players who had been in mourning for said brother since the War of the Ring.
It was so good.
That has yet.
It's like, oh no, the dastardliness.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun to play. Lexi McQueen, Black Girl Mage on Twitter, has exquisite to play with. Yeah.
Did they like rip off the mask and be like, do you remember this face? But it's like all mangled.
So it was completely randomized. So basically, they were ambushed, there were orcs, and there was this hooded figure, and of all of them, she was the only one who decided to fire an arrow at the mask, which caused it to fall off. and she briefly saw like mist in the darkness, her own eyes mirrored back at her, and then just nothing underneath. And we ended the session with it just giving out the cry of the Nazgul, and then that was it. And then we just had to sit on that for a week, which was delicious and hot.
I will tell you, as somebody that was in chat for that moment, it was one of those perfect stunned silences that just carried across her, and everyone was just like, what the fuck? And it was juicy. I loved it. It was so good.
Masticate that for hours.
Oh yeah, no, definitely.
Go do it.
Okay, we're gonna bring it down. Inspirational source for any of your campaigns. You can't pull Lord of the Rings out on this one. Ed, go.
Princess Mononoke is a big one. It depends on the project. I honestly just wanting to recapture that feeling of running around with friends as a kid around the garden and just pointing at things and willing things into existence. I think that is my very nostalgic and trite answer. Yeah.
Solid. Justin, go.
Well, for off the rails, I'd have to say at least the first season of Westworld, a lot of Western movies, and then also Supernatural, because of the other elements that I have built into kind of the darker side of that entire narrative. But honestly, even just listening to music, I find inspiration in really weird places, even if it's just like a billboard. Sometimes I'll just like see a particular image and that gets things gearing up in my head. I'm like, oh, okay. And then I have a whole side thought process. But yeah, I like to reuse things from other stuff, and I do listen to a lot of music.
Hell yeah. Tess?
I did a story campaign about, so it was like vampirism during the World War I. And what it was based on I had read a monograph about somebody who'd come back and had a terrible experience being shell-shocked, which is essentially, we kind of use that term loosely, but what it means were people who were literally so impacted by the hit of a shell that they were thrown, and a lot of times were buried under dirt, debris, bodies, unfortunately. And so it was a monograph about a man who had been found alive, buried under about 6 of his fellow soldiers, and the only way that he had survived for the time that he did was because blood had been trickling down from the wounds of them into his mouth, and that was how he had lived. And he ended up having this kind of weird psychological break where he became convinced that he needed the blood to live. And so years and years and years, obviously, of like therapy, because back then we didn't talk about PTSD. We didn't really understand wartime trauma. We just knew that he came back not right in the head, which is what they used to say. So I thought that was such a fascinating idea, that if you had experiences like that, yes, that would stay with you. Why wouldn't you think that you're some sort of malformed creature of the night after feasting off the blood of your fellow, infantrymen? So that was something that inspired a pretty brutal campaign.
Okay, so that was longer than a minute, but I would have been an asshole to cut that.
No, I would throw mine over. Over.
Yeah.
Here.
That was so disturbing. I'm just sitting here like, oh, yeah, no, that's good. I like that.
Yeah.
All right.
It's like rollover minutes. I'm rolling over time. I did.
You know what?
Right.
I'll allow it. Edward, one rule to change in any of the systems that you love.
Combat generally, especially if you're presenting it to an audience. No one want. This is my pet peeve. I'll keep it under a minute. But does anyone really want to listen to people? I think if you're presenting it to an audience, streamline or gut the combat system in anything you're playing.
Justin.
Counterspell. I've written my own rules to make it a lot more interesting instead of just a general fuck you kind of spell. There's a lot more dynamic with it.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And I'm
Tess.
banking this time in case I need it.
I was about to say, God damn it, I should have mentioned rollover minutes. This is my fault. Weight requirements. I fucking hate them. Just let me carry as much shit as I want. Like, unless I'm quite literally trying to move a building on my shoulders, just fuck off and leave me alone and assume I can handle my own stuff. Women have been hauling their own luggage for a long time. Like, we understand. I don't want to hear about like, did you account for that in your weight requirements? No, and I'm not gonna.
All right, let's flip it. Justin, favorite game mechanic?
Oh, favorite?
Favorite.
Oh my God.
Well, so in Off the Rails, I've started using story points, which I really like a whole lot. I think from a narrative perspective, it really gives the players a lot of agency. And the way in which I'm doing it is I am awarding them poker chips to keep with that kind of Wild West kind of theme. And I will allow them to collectively go all in so they can all pool their chips to collectively have a much more massive effect on what's going on.
Quickly
So,
describe what that means. Like, what are they using it for?
So, I mean, they can, like, if they're, say, in the middle of combat, sorry, I'm probably going to go a little bit over.
It's fine, go.
It's fine. If they're in the middle of combat, they can use all of their story point chips and basically, you know, if they wanted to, like, call in the cavalry or have some, you know, zany, like, a bullet ricocheted, like, up the cliffside or whatever, and it, like, hit a water tower, and now, like, the enemies are having to... They can add these elements that really benefit them. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to benefit them either. They could make it more intense and traumatic if they wanted to, but basically it allows them to, like, inject things within a little bit of reason. I want them to kind of, like, help keep the narrative cohesive, but yeah, they could really turn the tide and, like, I mean, make the story do a 90-degree turn if that's the time that they want to use those points.
I absolutely love that. Tess?
Do these have to be real, or can they be things we've designed for our own?
Either or.
Oh, so one of the things that I like to use for certain campaigns is what I call sacrificial Hail Mary, which is that if I have a player that is willing to take a hit for another player to keep them alive, I will allow the sacrificial player to make a Hail Mary, which means that prior to starting the campaign, everybody logs a Hail Mary thing, which is either help from a friend, boosting a spell, weapon nobody knows about, that they can call upon in certain moments. And so if you're going to sacrifice yourself, you get a Hail Mary moment to try to live. I will fully allow that.
Perfect. Ed?
Cool.
Do you mind if I steal that, Tess? That is...
No, by all means. I like rewarding people for offing themselves in service of others. It's fair.
Well, it's rich as well, I think, and thematic. Favorite narrative. I mean, I spoke earlier of Good Society, and the whole. So it's split into chapters rather than turns. And one of my favorites is simply rumors and scandal. Every player generates a rumor or a scandal, either about the world or about another character. At that point, it is a whisper under society's skin. The moment someone chooses to spread that, it becomes an assumed truth. And with it, you have a mechanical token that you can then spend in-game to basically bring that rumor into fruition and affect the story. I think it encourages social roleplay in such an exciting way. Yeah, I'm a big proponent for Good Society.
Is that from a particular system, or is that just something that...
So it's a system called Good Society by Story Brewers.
Got it.
So it's mostly rooted in Austin and sort of Regency drama, but
Okay.
I think you can apply it to anything, honestly.
No, that's super cool.
You've got 1 minute. Pitch me the greatest adventure.
I want to have a story where a bunch of adventurers go underground and find a hidden dwarven city and think, hey, we can live a great life mining. What they do not know is that all of the geography in this story is actually sentient. So as they are carving into mountains, they are carving into what is essentially a living sentient creature, which gets very angry at them. And they are all very stupid and don't ask why there are no dwarves down there anymore.
That's awesome. I love it. Ed, go.
This is an idea that I've been wanting to do for some time. This is the first time I'm airing it publicly, but I want to tell a story where the cast are doing dual narratives. One narrative, they are just people in the real world, all in a hospital, in one confined location. They might be patients, they might be doctors. The other mirror narrative is a story that is being told to a young girl, and the way in which she manifests the very real people that you are playing as fantastical characters within her narrative. It's basically Princess Bride meets Tarsem, so The Fall, essentially.
With 10 seconds left.
I got
Justin,
you. It's going to be a story that actually takes place in reverse. So we're going to start at the end game and figure out how we work our way backwards with a lot of intrigue and probably some eldritch bullshit along the way.
You're gonna Columbo that?
No, that is hard as fuck, but
It
could
is.
be either the most amazing or the worst thing, and I am there for both.
As long as he just
I
keeps
love it.
coming back in and being like, I have another question. Just keeps coming. One more thing. My wife wants an autograph. Yeah.
One more thing, she's dead and one of you kills
Yeah.
her.
Oh, by the way, I found a knife under your pillow. It's got blood and your fingerprints on it. Good day.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, the final ultimate question, and we are going to start with Edward. Where can everyone find you?
Oh, now that I can answer. Edward _ Spence _ on most social medias. You can find me every Tuesday at 12 p.m. PT over on Wounded Warrior Project. We are currently entering the last 3 episodes of the 4th Age. We have a lot of very exciting plans after that, but we have an incredible cast. We have Lexi McQueen, we have Jasper William Cartwright, Critical Bard, Sam, and we have the wonderful Beck Godsey as well. You can also find me over on RP Geeks, where you can find my 4-episode miniseries of Orbital Blues, Black Star, and you can also find me anywhere where there are good casts and stories that need facilitating. You can find me. I float.
Lurking in a corner.
It's almost like he's
Yeah, it's a bit creepy.
and said that about 100 times, at least 100 times. He's very good at reciting that one. Tess.
Oh God, I'm Tesselatrix on Discord, Instagram, and Threads, and that's pretty much it. Good luck. Otherwise, I'm the redacted location.
Yeah, it's the DM's guide on Threads and Insta, and probably on Discord, I think, is how I've got that set there. I had to double check that. But also coming up soon-ish, I guess, on YouTube under Chris's banner here.
Oh, that was a trap. Look at that. He was trying to trick you.
Segue right in. It was beautiful. You're going to be able to find him every Saturday coming in July. The official dates will be announced there, but that'll be happening on the Creative Coffee Cafe YouTube channel, along with the Dripping Creativity podcast channel as well. And that brings us to the end of our TTRPG Roundtable Special. A huge thank you to our incredible guests, Justin, Edward, Tessa, for sharing your wisdom and passion for the tabletop role-playing experience. Your insights and stories have truly enriched my life and this journey. Remember, dear listeners, to mark your calendar for June 29th for our live stream fundraiser for the Trevor Project through Tiltify. Let's come together and raise some awesome money. There's over 25 creators signed up, with possibly even more happening. It's going to be a lot of fun. Don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you happen to be watching. You can find me everywhere at Chris of the Void. This has been the Dripping Creativity Podcast, part of the Creative Coffee Cafe community.